Okay, welcome to the Hockey News Anaheim Ducks show. My name's Patrick Present, and I'm joined by Derek Lee. How you doing, Derek?
I'm good, Patrick. It's pretty hot though.
It certainly is. We're in the dog days of summer. The draft was about 2.5 weeks ago now, and the Ducks ran their development camp a couple days after, from July 1st to July 5th. So we're just going to break down the draft, what we thought of the picks, some nuggets we pulled from that, and then go into development camp and what really stood out. So why don't we go ahead and get into the big shock of the draft, although not a shock to some, but definitely to the draft E, third overall, Beckett Sennecke. I know, Derek, you were at the draft. You were at the draft for day one. Um, what was the reaction from you when the Ducks selected Sennecke at third overall?
Well, I don't think it was as surprising as it would have been maybe a day or two ago, just because there was a lot of late noise and rumblings about Seneca potentially going third to the Ducks. I know you and I had previously spoke about it a couple days before. I was like, oh, I'm locked in on Seneca. Like this is if they go with him, then I'm all for it. Um, And it's really surprising too, I think, for him. Well, I mean, everybody saw his face, but the fact that they didn't talk to him again after the draft combine, which was a week before, and so have Verbeek and the rest of the staff, they kind of kept it quiet. They targeted Seneca early on, and once they kind of had a good feeling about him at the combine, they decided to just go dark, and they didn't talk to him again. So, I mean, Seneca said that his agent, of course, he said, "Of course I knew." Well, then, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of talk going on, but yeah, that was definitely a swing by the Ducks, according to a lot of draft analysts. I think that was a really good pick for them, though. They definitely need to add a right shot into the system with the kind of tools that Seneca has. I don't think there's really a guy in the system that kind of fits what he has. And because of the late growth spurt, he has a lot of the elements of a smaller player, but in a bigger body. And so if he can continue to kind of fill out his form, or at least get adjusted to it, not really fill out his form, but put on some more weight as well. But just getting adjusted to how big he is now, I think he'll be a really great player in the future.
Yeah, because when you watch him play, he kind of looks kind of loosey Gumby-ish almost, and but he kind of uses that to his advantage to kind of manipulate his defenders. So, but I mean, it was kind of because we had talked prior about just how mushy that 2 to 15 range was, and that we wouldn't be surprised if Verbeek and Madden went in any number of directions. And by the time it got down to it, it wasn't a surprise at all to many of us, you and I included, that they went Seneca. And when you just look at what he can bring, and Verbeek had said that like the reason they picked him was because he can play any kind of game. He can play speed, he can play skill, he can play heavy kind of game. And I think we're not sure what the NHL will evolve into. Right now, it's very forecheck heavy and very size oriented, but it might shift again in the future. So the fact that Seneca can perform at any number of those levels, and the fact, like you said, he had to develop his skills as a younger player and avoid checks and things like that, and use his skill to avoid defenders. Now he can pretty much impose his will and barrel his way to the front of the net. Um, I think it was really exciting what he can bring to the future top six, top line of the Ducks. So that's going to be incredible to watch, and especially if you put him next to someone like Leo Carlson, who can, they just read the play so well, and they can just, I don't know, bend defenses to their will. So we saw him at development camp. We talked to him a little bit. Um, he's very self-aware of the things he needs to work on. And yes, obviously a lot of it is size, but we saw him kind of get exposed defensively a little bit in development camp, meaning the fundamentals aren't quite there. He has some trouble with body position and staying in front of guys, but he's definitely very aware he needs to work on that.
Yeah, I think some of that comes back to what you just mentioned too, is getting adjusted to his size. And I think he's really reliant on his stick. Obviously, when you're forechecking, your stick is a very important part of that, and cutting off passing lanes and trying to knock the puck off the opponent. But if he can learn to use his body a little bit more when he's checking, it makes him a lot more effective because he's not just relying on his stick, and he's not getting caught reaching or kind of just putting himself out of position by trying to reach for the puck all the time. Like he can stay with the guy and make sure that he doesn't get kind of like that open space that they're trying to get on the breakouts.
Yeah. So that's very exciting, and he's gonna provide a lot of offense. And honestly, if he can continue to work on that kind of defensive aspects, because yes, like you said, he just reads the play so well, and his anticipation is so great. I like to say that he's really involved. Like wherever the puck is on the ice, there's Sennecke, right? Like he just causes turnovers and he gets open for pucks. If the puck isn't on his stick, it soon will be. So um and yeah, just filling out that frame and then moving on. If you don't have anything else to add to Beckett, um, we're gonna go to Stian Solberg, who knows how to use his body for sure. The Ducks had the 31st pick, and they traded that along with the 58th pick in the draft to move up to 23, and take Solberg because he wasn't anticipated to fall that low, but there was a big run on forwards after the Blues selected Juracek, I believe. And the Ducks got their guy who is dubbed the most violent player in the draft. So, what'd you think of this pick?
Yeah, I didn't really look a lot into Solberg just because I figured he wouldn't be available at the spot that the Ducks had. I actually had him projected to go a lot higher than where he went. I had him around 14 or 15, just because I figured that one of those teams in that kind of that area would take a run on him just because he is a physical defenseman. So to see the Ducks trade up and get their guy, I think they had him a lot higher than most teams did as well. So for them to trade up a couple spots and only have to give up an extra third round pick, I think they're really happy with that. Just looking at him though, after speaking to him and then also just watching him at development camp, he's a really physical guy, but he's also great on the puck as well and taking out of the defensive zone, going back for retrievals, using his feet and his puck skills to try to get the puck out of the defensive zone instead of just making an outlet like the simple play. Like he tries to use his abilities to get the puck out of the defensive zone. And he kind of knows that he has the ability to do that as well. It's funny because Pat Verbeek described him as Radko Gudas, but 3 inches taller at the draft. And you can definitely see that with the physicality, but I think he already has kind of a better skill set than Radko Gudas. And I think as he continues to develop that, he'll be playing in the SHL next year for Färjestad. I think that'll go a long way, and he could potentially be NHL ready. Maybe not at the end of the season, but maybe 2 seasons from now.
Yeah, I think a big part of that was the World Championship tournament. And Pat, excuse me, Pat Verbeek had mentioned that that tournament he played against men, NHLers, and he really elevated his game to that level. And like you said, it's easy to fall in love with the physicality and the big hits and the highlights, but his game is a lot more intricate than that. There's a lot more skill than that. And yeah, like you said, I had him like around 15, and he fell to 23. So and yeah, 3 inches taller Radko Gudas, everyone loves that. He's already like a fan favorite, I think. He I love his attitude because he gets asked a lot, where does the physicality come from? What drives you to play that way? And he basically like, that's hockey. That's just how I like to play. It's just natural. It's just what I do. So I loved that. And then as far as the skill goes, he's like, yeah, I just have to play to my competition, basically. He said, yeah, he was going to play in the SHL next year and he's got to elevate his skill level. So I loved hearing things like that. And then, okay, let's move on unless you have anything else to say on Solberg, who I've dubbed the Norwegian Nightmare because I think that's a fun nickname. Moving on to the third pick of the second round, 35th overall, the Ducks selected Lucas Pettersson, out of Modo. He played mostly in the J20 league, and I had a handful of games in the SHL for Modo, but didn't really see much ice. Um, I thought this was a really exciting player. Maybe he says he models his game a lot after William Karlsson, and I think that's a really good comparison because he's just so responsible defensively. The skating is great, but there is some offensive upside. He's really good with the puck on his stick. He's very shifty. Um, he just probably should needs to work on attacking the middle a little more in those dangerous areas of the ice. But I thought this was a really it's not a Pat Verbeek pick because he's under 6 feet tall. So not what we're used to seeing, but definitely the skills are there and the compete level and defensive responsibility with Lucas Pettersson.
Yeah, I think this is definitely not a Verbeek pick. I think Martin Madden was really at the forefront of this. He even told Verbeek at the draft, like we got to wait a little bit on him because he's so lean and so slight. But I think it's a really great pick. I didn't know a lot about him, like I didn't know a lot about any of the guys past the first round. But just looking at kind of what he brings to the table, I think he has some offensive upside. As you said, I think we talked about at development camp. He kind of reminds me of Isaac Lundestrom, but with like more offensive upside in that aspect. I think, like you said, if you can attack the middle a little bit more, I feel like maybe players coming out of the Swedish leagues, they're a little bit prone to maybe staying on the perimeter a little bit. And that's kind of what Isaac Lundestrom has done since coming over to the NHL. But yeah, getting into the middle is important, especially when you're trying to score goals, which the Ducks need more of. Certainly,
Mhm.
I think it'll be interesting to see how he does once he's not playing at the J20 level anymore and once he's transitioned to the SHL, because obviously you want players to start playing against higher competition. I think he still has 2 more years on his contract with Moto, so maybe another year in the J20 and then a transition to the SHL after that, because not everyone is Leo Carlsson and can be playing in the SHL at 18 and 19. So I think it will be kind of a slow roll for him. I think a lot of people expect him to come up right away because he's such a high draft pick. But I think like development isn't linear for everyone, and I think there's certainly a lot of development that he still needs to bring. But once he's finished cooking, I think that he can be a really uh, middle six player, really good middle six player, and somebody that can contribute at both ends of the ice.
Yeah, and he did have a really nice U20 World Championship tournament. He scored 3 goals and 8 points in 7 games, wore a letter, so we like to see that. But yeah, I just think that's a really nice, responsible pick, but also, yeah, he has a lot of skill and he can read the ice pretty well, and hopefully that'll translate when he does make that jump because those SHL teams do love that kind of two-way responsibility. And like you said, that just goes to show how impressive Leo Carlsson was at that age to put up the points he did and dominate like he did against grown men in his draft year. And then, so let's move on to the third round. Um, the Ducks selected Maxim Masse out of the QMJHL. Um, 6'3", 190 pound right shot winger, and man, does he have he can really rip it. We saw him at development camp just light up the empty nets, but for real, you know, he has a heavy shot and it's accurate and he can skate. What'd you think of this pick?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult for me to think about him being 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", just because whenever I imagine kind of like these forwards that are really great at scoring goals or anything like that, I don't imagine them being like a super big guy. Obviously, someone like Patrick Laine is a big guy who had a great shot, but you don't really see a lot of guys in that kind of mold. And he's not just a sniper either. He kind of plays that power forward role just because he's so big and being able to kind of contribute at both ends of the ice. And I think a big knock on him and the reason why he fell that far was his skating. And I personally, I didn't feel like his skating looked at that bad at development camp. It certainly could use an improvement, but it's not something where it's like, oh, well, like Sasha Pastaja, where oh, he fell to the third round because his skating needs a lot of work. And if he doesn't improve that, then he's not going to make it to the league. I think there's some aspects of his game that can definitely translate to the NHL. Um, I think there's a lot of concerns about his upside in a top six role, but if you have someone like that on your top, not in your third line that can check and they can score some goals, like that's the perfect kind of fit that a playoff team needs to kind of get those extra contributions when they're making a run for the cup. So I think it's a really great pick. I think he also has acknowledged that he needs to work on his skating. So there's that. But yeah, I think I like the pick. I mean, I have nothing to complain about really.
Yeah, I think he was projected to go in like the second round, but a lot of teams are shied away because of the skating, I'm assuming. But 36 goals and 75 points in 67 Q games and wore a letter again. And I feel like this is the part of the draft where the Ducks have a certain type. Like they love these guys that forecheck really hard, they compete really hard, they get to dirty areas, they bang home rebounds, they're physical, defensively sound, like that prototype, the Nico Majadovic and Colson Petrie and Carey Terrance, like this year's version of that. I feel like they love these kind of players, and he fits that mold perfectly. And if you look at the Panthers, that just won the cup, they play a similar style to how the Ducks want to play. And, you know, yes, they have the Barkovs and Kachucks of the world, but they also have the Evan Rodriguez's and Ryan Lundbergs and, that kind of player. And that's what you need in the modern NHL. Same thing with the Avalanche when they won a couple of years ago. They have Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, but they also have Val Nichushkin who just forechecks the daylights out of you. So that's to me, that's what these picks in the middle, later rounds represent. And it's a very translatable skill. And like you said, the skating hasn't really hindered him to this point. And we'll get into more of what we took away from Dev Camp later, but definitely something that they worked on a lot was skating because you need to be able to skate at the next level. And I feel like another player in that mold of grinder heavy player is the pick they took 2 picks later in Ethan Procyszyn. So out of North Bay of the OHL, only 36 points in 62 games, but he was playing a limited role. And they matched up against Beckett Sennecke's Oshawa Generals in the OHL playoffs. But what do you think of the Procyszyn pick?
Yeah, just from everything I've read, it's definitely the type of pick that you use on a guy that you feel is going to help solidify kind of that bottom six, or at least be a checking forward. Like he's a big guy. He can play on the wing. He can play at center. I think he's probably going to be more of a center. In a way, he's kind of more like a rugged Nathan Gaucher in the way
Mhm.
that he plays. He's certainly a lot more physical, like just because he's a big guy already too. Definitely somebody that likes playing both ends of the ice, and he certainly doesn't need to be a main contributor to a team. He just wants to forecheck and hit guys all the time and make sure
Mhm.
that the other team doesn't score. So that's certainly a pick that's kind of targeted more for helping out potential bottom six in the NHL. And I mean, not every pick has to be a top six pick. I mean, obviously, with a third round pick, maybe you want to shoot for a little more upside, but at the end of the day, if you win the cup, people don't really care where a guy gets picked. They could be undrafted for all you care. As they help your team win the cup, then like the draft pedigree only goes so far, I think, once you are in the league for so long. So um, maybe you want a little bit more upside with that, but I think until maybe a couple of years down the road, then it's you can judge it a little bit more.
Yeah, you're not projecting the player they are now to be exactly who they are at the NHL level. It's just about finding a solid base and then trying to project out where they're going to be in 5, 6 years. Like we talked to Martin Madden before the draft, and he echoed that sentiment. It's not they're not drafting for these guys to play in the NHL tomorrow. They're projecting, what kind of role they're going to fill 5, 6 years down the road when the Ducks are hopefully very competitive, and we can just fill the bottom of that lineup with players like this. And they're important pieces to a cup team. And no, they're not very sexy on paper or when you're watching them per se, but they're definitely it's definitely again trending where the NHL is when you make picks like this. So now moving on, unless you have anything else to add to Procession. To Tarin Smith, who was taken out of Everett of the WHL. Sound familiar? A very uh, kind of on the smaller side. 6'1", not very small, but very elusive and offensive minded. But I think he has a good defensive fundamental base. Didn't put up a ton of points, 44 points in 67 games in the OHL or WHL. But when you watch him play, it's smooth, it's um, fundamental, and but he also flashes some dangling and some IQ with the puck on his stick. Another left shot defenseman, which is a theme of late. But what do you think of Tarin Smith?
Yeah, I mean the offensive upside is certainly there. I mean, it's really easy to make the Olin Zellweger comparisons because both lefties from Everett, and they actually did play together for a little bit, live together for a little bit as well. Um, but I think Tarin Smith, there's a lot of he can do a lot of those dangles and moving the puck around and using his feints and the ability to move the puck around to get by guys and set up opportunities for his teammates. I think the skating was a little bit of a concern, and but maybe the offensive upside kind of makes up for that. I think obviously you want your defenseman to be able to skate well because that helps them defend well as well. But I mean, this is just a solid mid-round pick. I think being able to get a defenseman. I mean, I think maybe they would like to get a right-handed defenseman, but also in the end, if your guys can make it to the NHL, the handedness is only a concern for so long. I mean, you just look at where the Ducks are right now and how many left-handed defensemen they have. Certainly a guy that needs a lot of time developing. He's not going to be like Owen Zellweger or Pavel Mintyukov, where they kind of play one or two more seasons in the CHL and then make their transition to the NHL. But I think there's definitely a lot of upside that they see in him. And of course, obviously, Glenn Cochran, who passed away this January from cancer, he was a big champion for Tarin Smith, and for them to be able to honor him at the draft with making that pick, I think that was really great for them.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And like you said, maybe the skating, there's a little bit left to be desired, but the way he moves at the offensive blue line and when he's retrieving pucks, I think it's not a hindrance at just yet at the level he's playing at. So if he can continue to round that out, I think there's a player there. He reminds me a lot of Jackson Lacombe, honestly. I don't know if the offense is necessarily going to translate to the higher levels, but definitely there's a good base there. So, I don't I think that's a fun pick and some are higher on him than others, but I do like the pick. Moving on is another sub 6 foot player, which is unheard of from Pat Verbeek in his tenure with Anaheim. The 100th pick in the draft was Alexandre Blais, who 5'10", 154 pounds, so needs to definitely get bigger, stronger, right? From Rimouski of the QMJHL, 84 points in 68 games, so the production's definitely there. And this is another player that the hands, the feet, he's super shifty and just bounces around the ice. But I think he does get position and can, win puck battles just with his low center of gravity and his smarts. So I thought this was a really fun pick. Definitely not the prototype that we were just talking about of the heavy forechecking player, but this is more of the maybe more of the Yegor Sidorov role where he's just a dangler and that kind of shifty player. What did you think of Blah?
I was really impressed with what I saw from Alex Blais, and um, just like everything he displays on the ice. He's a great playmaker. He can shoot the puck. He's his skating is not bad either too, especially as a smaller guy. Obviously, the big caveat is that he needs to put on a lot of weight because to make up for the lack of size. But I think he has the tools that translate to the NHL, and a lot of it is just kind of the cards that he was dealt in terms of being a smaller guy, especially when he's going up against guys like Stian Solberg at development camp, and he's getting absolutely bowled over because he's so light. But I think if he can kind of just keep going on the track that he is, and I mean, point totals aren't necessarily the be all end all, but keeping the point totals consistent and just continuing to develop. I think he said that his skating, he does want to improve. I think that's kind of a theme for everyone is they always want to get
Yeah.
better at skating, right? Because that can lead to so many more opportunities. I think yeah, just getting bigger. I think that's also a thing for every prospect in the book is you
Hmm.
want to get bigger and faster and stronger. But yeah, for Blais especially, I think getting bigger or at least stronger, not necessarily bigger, getting stronger and continuing to kind of play well. And I think maybe a couple years down the road, he could be ready for the NHL potentially.
Yeah, if you're looking for a sexy big swing, I think this is the guy just because he, like we were talking about, just the skill, like the stick time skill when you watch him on the ice, just the dangles and just how how fast he is and how good he is on his edges. He was just really fun to watch at development camp as well. And then moving on to a big right winger from the USHL, Austin Brunevik, who got 40 goals and 71 points in 61 games for the Madison Capitals. He'll be going to St. Cloud State next season in the NCAA. So this, what did you think of Austin Brunevik here?
Well, he's a big guy. I think he's 6'3", which is wild to think about. As me being only 5'10", I'm like got like 10 years on him. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, certainly a swing for, well, I don't even know if it's for upside, but just like a swing in general because he has the tools. He definitely played well for Madison last year after kind of being in that limited role. He played with some really talented guys at the NTDP too the last 2 years before that. So he knows how to play with skilled players. And like we mentioned before, with guys like Ethan Procyszyn, you want guys like that in your lineup to play along Leo Carlson and Mason McTavish, Trevor Zegras, and guys like that. So that's definitely what this kind of mold the pick is in. I think just the big concern for Brnovik is his skating. And certainly I was able to take that in firsthand at development camp. Kind of just the way he moves his arms is very unique in terms of skating. I think that really limits him a lot. I think if they can kind of work that out, he's definitely got something going because we saw at times during the scrimmage that he has good straight line speed and his curls and his turns are actually quite agile for someone of this size. I think it's just kind of working out his strides and making sure his arm movement isn't hindering his skating at all.
Yeah, he's got a very busy upper body, and I think if he can just generate that power lower in his body, like he does, again, like you said, in the tight areas of the ice where he's a strong, powerful player, if he could just translate that to more of his edges and things like that, I think you got a player there because yeah, the offensive upside is pretty undeniable there, and with a sixth round pick, I think no one's going to be close to perfect at that range. So I think that's a high upside swing. And if he just round out some fundamentals in his game, which hopefully he will at the NCAA level in a bigger role. So yeah, that's not a bad pick. And then one of the last pick the Ducks selected in the seventh round, 214th overall, was you're gonna have to help me with the pronunciation here.
Daryl's Ulyansky.
There you go. 6'2" left shot D from Latvia. One of the younger players in the draft, August 25th birthday. Um, Played at the J20 level like Pettersson did. The point total wasn't eyebrow raising per se, 29 points in 45 games, but we watched him play at Dev Camp and he's got a solid, like nothing blew you away, but nothing really stood out as negative either. He was just kind of good at every what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none kind of player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually impressed. I mean, it's hard to say when you're looking at a guy in the seventh round, right? It's hard to get viewings of guys that go in that round usually, but I was impressed with the way he kind of handled himself at Dev Camp. Like you said, there's nothing super spectacular about his game, but he's at least average in every category. I think he has a couple of offensive tools that he can improve on, and that would certainly help him make a better player. Um, but yeah, improving the skating, obviously. I think kind of like defensive fundamentals as well, just because he's playing at kind of a lower level at the J20 level. You want to see him kind of start to improve that as he starts to play against men. And it's kind of, I think it's just kind of a wait and see approach for him because like a seventh round pick is kind of just a shot in the barrel. And it's, if it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, then it's like, well, it's a seventh round pick. So,
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of guys I think that they could have gone with too, maybe with more upside, but I think there's also a myriad of reasons why those guys didn't get selected there or even get drafted at all. So I think Ulyansky's that's a fine pick, and it'll be worth noting how his development plays out over the next few years.
Yeah, and then just moving on to the development camp itself, it was very skating heavy, very defense heavy. Again, we've seen a lot of the drills that they use without sticks, where you just have to keep your body in front of attackers and things like that. And then there was a handful of camp invites. What stuck out to you the most from Dev Camp?
Definitely the skating. I mean they've been doing the skating drills for as long as I can remember. Definitely it's a lot more concentrated over the last couple years, especially once they brought it over to Great Park. Um, I think this year I was able to actually pay a lot more attention to the drills instead of kind of just running all over the place, because last year they had Leo Carlson, a couple other guys like Pavel Minchikov and Owen Zellweger, so a lot of kind of more well-known names, and this year is kind of um, more of a pot of unknowns, at least to the general public in terms of the of Ducks fans. So I got a really good look at a lot of guys and just seeing how their skating is and defensive fundamentals. I think some guys are really great at playing the body that you kind of wouldn't expect them to be, just because of maybe their size or their speed. Especially someone like Cutter Gauthier. I think this is one of the few times still that Ducks fans have been able to see him in person. And so to be able to watch him for an entire week and see him work on the little things, I think that was really great for people to see. I think you can kind of see why he's going to be playing in the NHL already, because he has all these tools that are already ready for the NHL level. So in terms of that, it was really fun to see all these other guys, especially too the players that returned from previous years, like Carey Terrance and Connor Smith, Cole Petrie, especially Igor Sidorov, definitely looked the part and head and shoulders above other guys for most of the development camp.
I'm glad you brought up Cutter just because I looked it up and he's the only player, only top 10 pick from the 2022 draft to attend a dev camp. He dominated at every level he's been at, and there wasn't really a reason for him to go to development camp, right? Like he could have just been home for the summer, get in the gym, on the ice, things like that. But it shows a lot to me, his like dedication to the organization, that he took the time to fly out to Anaheim for a week and get to know the players that might be his teammates in the future and really refine his skills. And it's clear that he's ready for the NHL just because he was just head and shoulders above everyone, like you were saying. Just every drill he did was with such polish that it was very impressive to watch firsthand and for that long against the kind of competition that was there, but not to downplay the competition that was there, but he's just that ready, I think. Um, and yeah, like you said, the skating element is important. And, with a lot of players on the development camp roster whose skating was kind of their weak point, that was good to see as well. Did anyone else stand out to you in particular? I know I'd like to shout out Nico Mijatovic. I thought he had a really nice camp. Not that you can take so much away from it, but just to see him healthy and kind of display the things that he was advertised as a year ago when he was selected at the top of the second round.
Yeah, like a guy like Jan Mishak, he's a little bit older, but he's also relatively new to the organization, like Cutter Gauthier. I was really impressed with I mean, it's kind of a cliche, but like how hard he works. He's definitely a strong forechecker. I mean, we've been talking about this entire time. You need guys like that in your lineup to just kind of offset the skill guys and make things difficult for the opposition. Um, the goaltending, I mean, it was the first time we got to see Vyacheslav Budiets, so that was certainly a trip. Speaks absolutely no English from what I've been told, but Jeff Glass, the goaltending coach, played in the KHL for 10 years. So I imagine he picked up a little bit of Russian along the way. So being able to speak with Budiets probably was really helpful for him. And then one of the camp invites that they had, defenseman Josh Zinger, he played at Northern Michigan this past season, but he'll be playing at St. Cloud State with Austin Bernabé this upcoming season. It really impressed me with just kind of his offensive skills and his skating. Um, I think you'd mentioned that he kind of reminds you a little bit of Olin Zellweger, but as a righty. And I certainly saw the same thing. He's a little bit a smaller guy, but he's really well built. Like just impressive. I think he might be a guy to kind of keep an eye on. He's a little bit older, 2001 birth year, but he did a lot of things right in the drills and in the scrimmage as well. So maybe a guy to keep an eye on for the future.
Yeah, definitely that low center of gravity and that, like you said, that skating ability was nice to see, but also the defensive fundamentals were there. So that was a nice little treat because you don't expect much out of camp invites. Like I don't even remember if Suchanek was an invite a few years ago, but like to get anything out of players like that is fun to see. So I think that'll do it for us, right, Derek?
Yeah. Yeah, the last, I think Simon Benoit was a camp invite 7 years ago or
Yeah.
something like that now. And then, yeah, Tomasz Suchanek was camp invite last year. And then he got an invite to rookie camp and he played in the rookie tournament. So it's a really great progress for him. And he had a terrific year in the AHL. So that'll be something to keep an eye on this upcoming season for sure.
All right, we're gonna wrap up the Hockey News Anaheim Ducks show, but thank you for watching and be sure to check out thn.com/Anaheim for all of our updates and follow us everywhere and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Eric.